Okay, so we're done with the shirt, and I think it's time to add a more complicating looking clothing. So we're gonna start with the jacket. Now, I always say I don't really recommend sculpting clothing because in the Blender tools are not very forgiving for sculpting clothing, so modeling is probably a bit better for it. But I'm still going to use sculpting in this tutorial. So last tutorial we created a shirt, which we're having in here. Now, if you were following from the last tutorial, you probably have the body masked. Now, it's not really a problem because we will just extend the mask to create a shirt. So if you're from the last tutorial, don't delete the mask, but if you're new, let's just start from new thing. So we'll use a lasso mask again. So if you cannot see this as a lasso mask, just hold your mouse on it and we can choose what masking tool we want, lasso mask, and just quickly draw a mask. Now I will start with the sleeves, now the body, and just filling in with the neck. For the jacket, I will actually create a bit more of the neck, maybe even more, but we can always actually extend it in the sculpting, so we don't need to have a perfect mask. Now, if you mask something and you want to make it disappear, you will have to have this tool selected and hold Ctrl, and it will actually delete the mask where you will draw. Now, I'll just use the M for the mask brush and fill in the places, just like I did in the last tutorial. And I think this edge is not flowing too well, so we can use lasso or the simple mask. I'll use the lasso because I think it's just much faster. And fill in here, so I think it flows a bit better. Now, if you're having some trouble masking like this and you want to mask here, but you can see that the body is getting masked as well, you can do a box hide. So we can actually hide this part of the body. And now we can use the mask here to have a nice clean mask, and just press Alt H to unhide. The body is not masked and we had a perfect mask here. Okay, so as in the last tutorial, we'll use mask extract again. Save your files. Mask extraction is pretty heavy operation for your PC, so I always recommend not having too many vertices. So this is not too many vertices, but if it's still too much for you, go back into object mode of the mesh and use the summation. Just lower this value to 0 point something. Don't go too drastically on it, and apply it when you're done. Now my mesh is not that heavy, so I can use this. So I'll use it and mask extract. We won't need a solid, so just extract it this way. Now when operation is done, we'll have something like this. Let's move it to the tutorial folder. Yes, this is where we're holding stuff. And yeah, so we won't have a solid. At this point, it's going to be even a bit more harder for your PC to hold this operation because we'll have to go into edit mode. So if you're not comfortable, this is a good point to use a decimation. Now, 200,000 is not too bad for my machine, so I will go just into edit mode. And when we have a mesh, you'll see it's very dense. For starting to sculpt, we will always need to close all the holes. And how to find holes, you will have to go into select by trait and on manifold, so we can see where the faces are not closed. Oh, even on the back we have a small hole, and I'll just press F, and that will fill in with the face It's not perfect or anything, it's horrible actually for modeling and stuff, but it works for remesher. So let's save our file and go into the sculpting mode and start with the remesher. Now be very careful with the remesher always, because it's a very heavy operation, especially if you're going with the lower and lower number. And I'll start just remeshing and see what I get. So this is definitely going to be too low. I'll add a bit more. Too low. A bit more. And just looking somewhere where the shape looks decent enough and something that I can work with. So I think for comfortable sculpting, 30 or 50,000 is good. I would probably, usually when I'm alone, I would go for 100 or 200,000, but this is going to work. Now, when we made the face, there will be some imperfections and some differences in the mesh. So what I can recommend is using a symmetrize option in here. Now we'll have the faces filled in completely the same size, so there will be no differences. And at this point we can start sculpting. Now we'll probably need our body. Again, as last time, we'll be using mesh filtering inflate and just inflate a little bit. Don't forget to use the mirror. Select any brush so we can smooth. We don't really need too much body details on any clothing. This is not an elastic type of clothing. Okay, so when we have something like we can call a base, now we can try shaping clothing which we want. So I want my neck to be a bit longer and actually act like a neck, so probably a jacket won't be having this shape of neck. It will probably be somewhere further from the body and have an inner part here, maybe drapes off a bit. Now it's more about testing things, but you can follow me. And I just fill in this place because jacket will have a nice equal flow. I'll definitely make the sleeves longer. So you see, we didn't really need a perfect mask. This works perfectly fine. And yeah. Now there's something you might know about. So let's first remesh. Always don't forget to save. We can do a few things for making this surface more flat, is just by going into the straight view where we can see the surface and use a flattening, one of the flattening tools. Or we can use the masking tool, like lasso tool, and mask, slice, and fill holes. And it will leave a decently flat surface. Now we can just move. Let's get our body back. And as you can see, I'm not trying to follow the perfect shape of the body, of the arms in this case. I am thinking a bit about the gravity, that the gravity would drag the clothing down. And I am definitely dissolving the shape of how his arms are flowing and just having a straight line. because that's how usually clothing is following your body. It follows the outer shape which it's touching, but it's not following what it's not going to be touching. So I'll smooth it a bit more. I'll fill in this gap so the clothing is actually a bit more of the same lengths, thicknesses. One thing I really like with my clothing, if of course it's not going to work for every clothing, is having a sharper shapes on the places where the seams connect. So perfectly for male jackets, I like to do that, sometimes for females as well. So when we have a draw sharp selected, we go into stroke options and turn on stabilize stroke. So we will have this following line where we can draw a bit better lines. I'll make my brush decently small but still big enough and start drawing a sharp seam around the shoulder area. And I just like to drag this out and make this follow the shoulder shape. Make it smoother. We don't need all of these shapes from the body on the clothing. It just makes it look a bit more like a clothing. Now we can do a lot of things, and of course it depends from design. So I'll just put this as design elements. It doesn't have to be in every single clothing. So I'll use a draw sharp here. And even in here. So a lot of male jackets has these type of connections. And usually all type of shirts will have seam in here. And from the same seam line, it drops down to the clothing of the body. Okay, so these seams are definitely not something we'll be finishing with. It's just landmarks. This is the shoulder ones are more what we're actually following because we will model this thing in. Now I'll smooth. I'm usually always smoothing a lot of the shapes and then using a grab brush tool to fill in it. Now I'll show you a bit of the trick if you want to have a separation in the middle of the clothing. So what we can do is use draw sharp again, and in the stroke options use not a spacing option but use a line option. Now when you have this brush selected, let's make it maybe a bit smaller, go into the middle and we'll have this line following our mouse. If we're holding our click, as you can see it on the here, I'm holding my button, just drag in the line, releasing, and we will have this crease. We can do it again, and you can do it as many times as you want. Now this is a straight line, so we can crease this part. Now by creasing this, I will just hold Ctrl while dragging this line, and it will crease this part. And we have a nice jacket. Now that's why we made our shirt, so we will be able to see the shirt beneath our jacket. And that's how we will make a bit more complicated looking clothing. I think I put this a bit too far, so I'll get a bit closer. One thing with the clothing is clothing will always need a lot of topology, and Blender is not the best program for holding too much topology, but it's fine for bases like this. And this base we will use for actually modeling our clothing a bit later. So I want this part of the clothing to be a bit taller. Let's maybe push this one a bit outer. We can always hide the body and make the clothing look like it has a thickness in some areas. So will this be as kind of like a thickness. And when you're somewhat happy with your design of the clothing, we can start going a bit lower with the remesher. Let's save the file. I think I want like 200,000, but if your machine is struggling with that type of number, it's definitely not a must. It's just a quality of life thingy. Okay, so we're close to 2,000. I think 200,000, we don't need to go that much. So I'll just use a flattening brush to make this part of the clothing a bit flatter, so we can actually have a clearer mind on how thick the clothing is. Let's hide a bit more of this place where it's very visible even when we have our body here. Okay, so this is something as good as a base, I believe. And it really depends now what you want to add more. A lot of actual jackets don't really follow the body. They go something like this. And I actually want to extend my clothing beyond my shorts. So again, it depends on what type of design you want for your clothing. It doesn't have to be a same looking clothing you're trying to make, but if you're following the tutorial, that's perfectly okay. Just do the same what I'm trying to do. Okay, so when you want this to get closer, but you see that the grabbing brush tool is not doing, like you want to have this a bit closer, but you don't want to have this pinching, weird pinching, we can actually use a pinching tool and we'll create this a bit smoother way of them connecting. A bit of grab brush tool. And we have a decently nice base of the shirt. We can work a bit more on the neck area. I actually want to drag this out. So we still have a line tool. Let's just go back into spacing tool and draw in the sharper area on the neck. And let's push it in. Don't worry about the body appearing now. It doesn't matter too much. Now at this point we can fix it. Okay, we have a nice base of the clothing. Okay, when we are done with the sculpting part, we'll have to retopologize it. Again, the cube, edit mode, delete, adding a mirror modifier, turning on vertices and clipping. Now, with the clothing like long sleeve, I usually like to go with the sleeves first. So, or it doesn't matter. You can do with the body, but last time I did with the body, so this time I'm going to do with the sleeves. I will turn on clipping just for this one operation by adding a circle and adding 8 vertices and scaling it down. when the circles are not touching, we can turn back on clipping. And I'll just position the circle in the place. The better and closer you're gonna get to the mesh, the better. Well, let's go back to the side view. And I'm trying to place where our elbow would be. You can go into vertex mode and look at it. And we can extend and put it on where the seam would be. In the side view, we can use scaling on only y-axis. And at this point, I'll just fill like 3 faces, 4 faces here. Or we can do 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I'm done with it, I'm just gonna go and use a shrink wrap on the shirt, of course. Oh, I accidentally pressed it on the body. Naming objects definitely helps. And we can quickly hide this. Let's check where we're having this one. So we can place this one in the base and turn it on. Shade smooth. And we have our sleeves yet completed. Of course, we will do a lot more work on it. So this might be much faster and easier way for you of doing it. This, oh, don't forget the snapping tool. Now, I'd probably still add 2 more vertices actually in here, but we will see if we will even need it. So again, we're going as low as possible on the vertice count, because we can always use a subdivision to get more vertices. Very quickly filling in the object when we're so low. And we don't have to worry about so many things when we are going that low poly. And staying on low poly is the trick of completing your retopology quick. The higher poly count you will go, the longer it's going to take for you to finish. Okay, now there's one thing I'm thinking about here, and this edge will probably be our clothing seam. So I'm trying to place this edge in the way where our seam of the clothing would be. So try to keep it pretty nice and flowy, straight shape. And you're going to be completely fine. Okay, I'll add one more mesh in here. I mean, one more face. And just extrude from it, dropping down to the body. Quickly pressing F to fill in the faces. Nothing complicated. Quick remeshing. Okay, I probably will add one more vertex here. And again, you see, if I'm adding only one vertex more, one loop more, how much longer I'm going to take to fiddle with the positions of the vertices and fixing them. So in that time, you could have filled much more of the clothing. Actually have a bit more vertices here because I'll just fill in this by the face. And they all disappear that way. Okay, filling in the faces again. And trying to somewhat make the faces similar distances by following the body shape. Let's try to get this on the line. I'm not worrying about too much now of the differences in the sizes, just getting everything filled, and when it's filled, I'm like, okay, now it's time to do a bit of work. It doesn't have to be too perfect, especially as if it's only a base. But if you're going to be using it in your game, definitely don't be afraid to spend a bit more time on it to get it perfected. Okay, so this is definitely a very low poly now. I would probably add one more edge here like this, and it would make the faces more. Let's actually do that. I'm just quickly press Control double 2 times G, fill to slide it, and now use a shrink wrap. And we put it in quickly. This line will not be damaging to our clothing. We'll still be adding a few more edges there. And let's just fill in. Always take a look how it's looking, and don't be afraid to think a bit how to make it a bit better, because a nice topology is nice topology. Don't be afraid to make some mistakes. Test things. Okay, this is definitely shouldn't be a face here. I don't know why it became like this. I think I'm going to fill like this. This is definitely not the best way. Let's shade smooth. If you want to test how bad this transition is, you can use a subdivision modifier just to test it, and when you subdivide more times, there should be some problem with the shading happening. So you don't really see any problem with the shading. So I don't think this is going to be too big of the problem here, but we can, if you're not happy with this, work on it more. Can you try merging this and doing like this? This is probably a lot of cleaner, but if you think if this is not too big of drag on this one vertex because it's controlling a huge pole, we can try subdividing again, and we can see a bit of difference in the shading, but it's not too much. You can try changing matte caps to see the problems, but I think it's working pretty well. So let's keep it this way. This is even going to be lower and very smooth shape. Okay, so let's just fill in this one. We can add one more loop, of course. Yes, just following the shape. Remeshing the mesh might be looking very complicated at the beginning, but it's just about doing it few times, and you'll learn like new ways of making it, and the more ways you learn, the easier it's going to become to actually executing the remeshing process. All right. So you can clearly see how fast we're moving through the remeshing process. Now, there's definitely going to be a harder places coming up right now, where we'll spend a bit more time trying to remesh it. Now, there's one thing I'm trying to keep my mind on, and we will be using this edge here. So I'm thinking about this edge and this other edge which is following the body, because in here we will place like a seam. So if I put one more mesh, I'm looking at this distance, these distances. Let me just hide the body. I'm looking that these distances would be similar in size, so when we're going to add additional mesh in here, additional seam, it's going to be looking crispy. Okay, so I think this place is a bit too differentiated in the size, so I'll just move this a bit closer. We can even keep this one now. It's just gonna be making a bit longer to work, but we can actually dissolve it quickly. So just how you choose to make it. All right, let's add a few more vertices in here. I'm probably adding too little, but that's fine. You can see how easy it's deleting and adding. The worst thing you can do is being afraid by changes. And if you are afraid of changing things, then you will not learn new techniques to make it faster and better for yourself. So try to not be afraid to delete and think about it. But if you're stuck, don't be afraid to move on and not think about it. So it's like a really tricky way of sometimes you have to think and sometimes you don't. So okay, so I can see we're very quickly filling in the whole shape of the jacket. Now this last vertex, last base with the shirt will probably be the longest spent on the shirt. So let's just do the test. Okay, definitely not what I need. This base is not what we want. Oh. I think this should be working. Now this part will definitely be a bit annoying. So I can think a bit, how can we maybe eradicate this problem? Let's try adding one more loop in here, and let's delete this one for now. We can fill in like this and we'll have a clean face here and a nice flowy edge running down, but this creates few problems. Now if we try to add the loop, you will see that the difference will be very big on how wide the meshes become, so that is one reason why I wouldn't go this way. So we'll sadly, but we'll have to deal with that problem in this case. Now, if you feel like you won't need this edge, you can go ahead and merge it like that. But in my case, I know for sure that we will need it. So I will have to have it here. So I kind of have to figure out what I'm gonna do with it, but I don't want to think too much about it. I'll just try filling other faces and not worry about that problem for now. This is going to be too big of the difference, so I'll just add a loop in here and not think about it at all. Because anyways, we will need this mesh. Now, when we added this one, we'll definitely need to fix this face distance in between. And let's just start trying filling out the other. Okay, this is problem because we have 5 faces. Now, if you want to be strong, you can just leave a triangle here and say you're the strongest man in the world and not worry about it, and it would be perfectly fine. No one would really care about this triangle. Triangles are not really that bad as a lot of people imagine. But if you don't want this, we'll be having to add quite a few vertices here, and there's many ways of doing it. So first we'll need one more loop, because that's how we appear one more vertex, and we'll need one more edge to make the flow of the faces not too horrible. So we have our base jacket. Now the things I'm going to do is select this shape and use the creasing brush, the creasing operation again, because this part of the mesh will have to be creased, and this place and beneath our arm as well. Now let's unhide our shirt. This is the base. This is not what we need. This is the shirt. And let's actually unhide the body. What I'm gonna do is always go into the sculpting mode. Now you can see this part doesn't really need inflating, or this part, only this part kind of needs. So we'll probably shouldn't use a crease. I mean, inflate, I don't know what I'm talking about, sorry. Inflate operation of mesh fill, you probably shouldn't use it, and use a simple grab brush tool. So let's do that. Just use a grab brush tool and don't forget the mirror again. Now, you probably won't need this operation when the mesh itself is mirrored. Now, some of these places like here, I probably wouldn't even use a grab brush tool and just use a bit of inflate brush. Now, it's probably a bit hard to fill on all of these places because our mesh is very, very low poly. So what we can do is actually subdivide, and we'll subdivide it anyways. But this is like what I got used to, fixing the low mesh, subdividing and fixing the higher mesh, but you can just use it on the higher mesh. Now, yeah, some of the places we cannot fix because of how low polys we are. And we will still need to fix the mesh a bit. All right, so let's subdivide it. I'll probably lose this parts. We can use a crease brush. I mean crease operation. And we'll have it sharp. We can do the same in here. Use 2 subdivisions. Now, if you want to do, let's keep this as a base and let's duplicate one in the tutorial. And now we can do anything with this. So I'll just apply and apply and see how low we're getting, how high we're getting the mesh. And it's pretty high poly. If you don't want to go that high, you can use one subdivision, not two. Oh. Let's see how it looks like in two. So yeah, it looks much less on the one subdivision. So you might use this one. Let's use this one actually. Okay, so let's just fix these parts. Okay, now we definitely needed a mirror operation, but we forgot it, so we can Control Z. Don't be afraid to Control Z a bit. Or if you did a big mess, just duplicate your base you created and try again. That's why we're making that base. I actually want to see how the mesh looks here. So what we can do is go here and turn on wireframe. And I can see I have one vertex here, which I can draw. And make this cut sharp and clean. Okay, this part again, inflate brush. There's no other way of fixing this. And just very lightly brushing on it. Let's turn off this. And we have a really nice base for our jacket. Looks pretty cool. What we can do now is few things, which we will do it now. So first thing is we can extrude. But I see that it's messing up for some reason. Let's hopefully see that the mirror is not on. Because if it's on, it might be messing us up. We can actually delete half of the body and use the mirror again. I actually like how this looks like. I don't want to do too much. Okay, but I see that the neck is too far from actual body. So I'll just make it a bit closer. Very slick clothing. All right. I still want to add a bit more detail to the clothing. Can even fix a mesh in edit mode, that's fine. Just make sure that you're mirroring it on another side. Or if you fixed only this one and you want to fix another side, you can delete half of the cloth. Make sure it's half. And just use a mirror modifier with the clipping on. Apply. And if you're not sure if it's clipped, you can merge by distance. And you can see 0 removed. And it's definitely completely mirrored. Okay, edit mode. I'll add one more loop just because this distance, I want to be similar as this distance. So I can actually even, let's turn off the snap, and by pressing double G, let's lower it. But I can see it's not mirrored on another side. So what I will do is actually use mirror. So let's just completely delete another side. make sure nothing is left. And we'll just use mirror modifier, why not? Now I will select this one again, double G to slide it a bit down. Can as well turn on the vertices so we can see what's happening. I will select these faces and these faces with the loops. And I will use the extrude operation and inflate operation. So I'll add something like this. You can check how it would look even subdivided. If you like how it looks, amazing. If you don't, we can use a few bits more of creasing. Let's just turn off from the viewport subdivision. Select the places where we would want to crease. We'll actually crease few places. If you're having an edge selector, you can select other edges, but if you have like a vertices selector and you select the edges, you will see that these edges will get selected too, so you cannot crease it, or you will going to get into the trouble. So you can crease one by one or select everything. I'll just crease one by one because it's not really any difference for me. Let's check how it will look in subdivision, and I think it's looking perfectly fine. Another thing we can do is cut one of the edges. Or actually, let's not cut, but just select it and double G, move it up. We'll have this cut. Now, you probably will have to crease these edges to get that sharp area. And I will select the loop. Don't need to select that one. So we can deselect those, extrude, and make something like this. Crease these edges. Add one more loop and a bit scale. Position it so it looks nice. You can play with the scale as well. Just make sure it's not interpolating, not touching its mesh. And we'll add another one and slide it to the bottom. And when you're done with the sliding, just scale it. If you don't want this, we'll have to select everything and move the mouse to the middle. And this will delete the crease. It just still looks weird, but it looks fine in the viewport. Okay, we have a decently looking thingy. Now it probably, when they scaled, we moved this one, so I'll just reposition it back. And we have a nice looking clothing. Let's shade smooth. We can start by adding now the things we want. So for ending the creases, we will probably need much more vertices, and I'm not sure if you want to have them. So I'll not add them on the jacket, but I will add them on the pants. So when we'll be working on the pants, I'll do a different crease and show you how it's done. We can still work a bit more on a jacket in the sculpting mode. And I think it looks pretty good. If you want, you can add another material and change the color. Let's make it like letter color. And now we have a shirt and a jacket. We can delete the mesh we won't need. And this is just a basis.